calling it an epidemic. Across the country, South Florida has become known as ground zero for people looking to score prescription drugs like OxyContin. Addictive pills are so easy to get here that drug traffickers drive from states like Kentucky and West Virginia to load up on hundreds of legal narcotics that they then sell on the streets. And the number of addicts and prescription drug overdose deaths is skyrocketing. Investigative reporter Terry Parker spent 4 months investigating this crisis and joins us with her special report on the oxy epidemic.
The stories I've heard are heartbreaking. Entire families devastated by their teens or adult children getting hooked on pills with street names like Oxys, Roxys, Xanax bars, and the Blues. Pills that experts say are the equivalent of synthetic heroin. Pills that the sheriff's office says are killing more than one person a day here in Palm Beach County.
Happy memories.
Say, I'm a perfect little angel.
But now the angelic little boy is grown, in jail, and his father blames pain clinics.
He got so bad here, he was taking this needle. Instead of shooting in his arm, shooting it under his tongue, under his fingernails.
James McGilvery says his son got hooked because pain clinics made it so easy.
These doctors do not care at all.
This patient agrees.
They actually basically just give them out.
So they're easy to get?
Oh, very.
21-year-old Anthony Lazarique was also a pain clinic patient, but his parents say they had no idea how many pills he was on until Jacqueline Lazarique went into Anthony's room to find him on the floor not breathing.
I begged them to save him. I said, please save him. And then one guy came out shaking his head. And I went, what are you talking about? This isn't real. This isn't real. It's not happening. This isn't happening. It can't be true. I was so mad.
George Lazarique says Anthony had gotten approximately 80 OxyContin, 80 methadone, and 80 Xanax on June 29th, and he died of an overdose 3 days later. They hired attorney David Spicer to sue Anthony's provider, Dr. John Christensen.
We allege that Dr. Christensen's care and treatment really had no medical basis.
Dr. Christensen says he didn't kill Anthony. He says Anthony came to him already taking an enormous amount of pills, and he was weaning him off.
I remember Anthony very clearly because I liked him. I liked him a lot, and I did everything I could to be a friend, a good doctor, and to help him.
Christensen says he wanted to go to trial to prove his innocence, but that his insurance company settled the Lazarique's wrongful death case against him. The Florida Office of Insurance records show the settlement was for $250,000. Pain clinics are legal. Patients walk in with cash and can get drugs on site, often in large amounts. Because most clinics do not accept insurance, they are not regulated by the state. Instead, they rely on the judgment of doctors and pharmacists who may or may not be able to tell if someone is really in pain or is an addict. And that's one of lawmakers' biggest concerns. Anyone can get an occupational license and open a pain clinic and hire doctors to write the prescriptions without any special training in detecting addicts, limits on the amount of drugs they may prescribe, or regulating oversight of their business.
I'm not answering any of your questions, but we need you guys to leave.
Can we come in and talk to the manager?
Yeah, you can't talk to anybody.
At Executive Pain Management in West Palm Beach, the bouncers won't talk. And like every other pain clinic we go to, the customers hide their faces. The parking lot is full of cars from Tennessee and Kentucky. In those states, pills are hard to get, so cops say addicts drive for hours to South Florida, where laws are lax and it's easy to score.
The pill that you can maybe get on the street here for $15 on the street will sell for $30 up in Ohio, Tennessee, Kentucky.
In this car from Tennessee, 3 men deny they're here for the pain clinic.
What are y'all here for? I'm sorry?
Weightlifting.
Weightlifting?
Right.
Oh.
This place just opened, and even without a sign, there's a steady stream of customers. As we videotape from across the street, a man approaches and says, we're recording his business. Are you the doctor?
No, I'm not the doctor.
Are you the owner?
No, security.
Oh, you're security. Who's the owner?
I'm not at liberty to say.
We've discovered one of the major players in South Florida is this man, 29-year-old Jeff George. George showed up at 2 of the clinics after we did.
Are you telling me you're connected with this clinic too?
I can't comment, but we can talk later on.
Off camera, George says he's a partner in clinics all over the country, including this one in Lake Worth and these 2 in West Palm Beach. He takes credit for starting the first pain clinic in Broward County 4 years ago. He says some of his clinics pull in over $1 million a year. And he's so successful, others are now copying his business model.
We'll talk later on.
When are we going to talk, Jeff?
Georgia's employee told me they are a legitimate business, helping people who are truly in pain. He says they don't give out pills to addicts and claims they even call the sheriff's office when patients appear to be doctor shopping. The business is moving north from Broward to West Palm to the Treasure Coast. At the St. Lucie County Jail, officials say 80% of their female inmates are here because of some connection to prescription pills.
Once I came to Florida, it was real easy to get, and I got addicted real quick.
Addicts and their parents admit they share the blame, but they're angry at doctors and clinic owners they say are handing out the addictive drugs for easy cash.
You rely on a doctor or a profession or to help you, not to kill you. And, the problem is just getting out of hand in this area. It's just unbelievable.
The problem has gotten so alarming that some local state lawmakers are pushing bills next week for stronger regulation on the pain clinics, the doctors, and the access to addicting drugs. The sheriff's office says it's investigating several clinics right now, looking for evidence to bring charges against any illegal traffickers. Terry Parker, WPBS.
There are about 35 of these pain clinics in the Tampa area, some of them legit, but this one behind me shut down tonight after a raid, much to the surprise of many people who were in the waiting room waiting to see a doctor and get a script. This is the first pain clinic bust in Tampa, but police promise it won't be the last.
Even though they're storefronts, they're dressed as medical clinics, they're really causing us to, it looks like they're drug holes.
And police say hundreds of people showed up to fish at 2137 MLK Boulevard today. Some called it a zoo and a madhouse. In fact, the waiting room crowd grew so big, people meandered through the back parking lot and down the side of the building. People like Kristen Wilson, who admitted to us they travel great distances just to get a script.
Scared to death. I'm still shaking. I'm just ready to go home.
And some did go home after DEA agents searched them and their cars in the parking lot, but not before talking to us. A man wearing a Cincinnati Reds ball cap wouldn't give us his name, but says he drove all the way from Ohio for prescription painkillers.
For pain management, I have back problems, so that's why I was there.
And he admitted it's much easier to get what he needs in Tampa.
It's a lot harder to get treated in Ohio than it is here. It's just therapy and therapy and therapy, or just do this, do that, and then it's just a long process. Here it's walk in, walk out, and you're good.
Hundreds of people were turned away at this cash-only pain clinic and went home empty-handed, while Tampa City Council voted to give police the ammunition they need to shut down more operations, just like this one.
This is nothing more than drug sales under the auspices of pain management.
Now back live here along MLK Boulevard, we know that there are arrests to come. That's according to Tampa police. We also know they did make some arrests of people who were breaking the law while they were sitting in the doctor's office. Things like for an outstanding warrant, failure to appear in court, and also possession of marijuana. So they did make 4 arrests, but Tampa police say this is far from over. Of course, those federal search warrants are sealed for now, so we're going to have to wait and see where they go from here. Live in Tampa, I'm Carson Chambers, ABC Action News.
Learning more tonight about 4 pain clinics in Palm Beach County raided and shut down by federal agents and sheriff's deputies. Officials say the clinics are nothing more than fronts for legalized drug dealing. Even if you don't know anyone who's addicted to pain pills, there is reason to watch this problem closely. News Channel 5's Evan Axelbank is live in Weston tonight, where a news conference explaining the raids just wrapped up. Evan?
Jim, we're here at DEA headquarters, and officials here said many times today that 7 Floridians die every single day from overdosing on pain pills. But those same officials also say that the pills hurt other people, nearby businesses, and today those local business owners are thrilled about the countywide raids. The 3 best-looking letters to Anthony Finaldi are DEA.
When I saw these, all the police officers and the DEA here,
I'm telling you, you don't realize coming to work every day for the last 2 years and seeing this place, what a relief it actually is.
A former addict himself, he owns a halfway house that's next door to the taken down clinic in the Cardello Plaza in Lake Park. He says hundreds of drug addicts filtered in and out of North Palm Pain all day, every day.
They'll all stand out there and they're all in pain, right? As soon as them doors open, I've actually witnessed them stumbling over each other, running so fast to get into the pain management clinic.
He points to the shuttered stores and empty sales racks in the plaza as proof that the pain clinic wasn't just hurting the people they sold pills to. Dr. Edward Buonadonna is a chiropractor.
These guys have killed our plaza. I mean, the day they opened, from day one, they've just been handing out the scripts, and the people that they've been bringing in are the dealers, the addicts from all the other states.
He hopes this isn't the last of the takedowns and that business in the plaza picks back up.
I've barely hung on in here because the element that came down for these drugs scared away a lot of the patients that were coming here that were getting treated for the same conditions that people over here were getting drugs for.
The owner of North Palm Pain faces money laundering, racketeering, and drug trafficking charges. And if he is convicted of those charges, he faces 325 years in prison. We're in Broward County tonight. Evan Axelbank, WPTV, News Channel 5.
Local doctor and a man from Wellington who ran some of the busiest pain clinics in our area are now facing murder charges. This is part of a 2-year investigation.
Our Terry Parker has been covering this story since the very beginning. She joins us with this update. Terry?
2 big announcements today. The federal government indicting 32 people in 2 counties in a massive pill mill takedown. 4 pain clinics owned by the Wellington George brothers. At the same time, the Palm Beach County State Attorney announcing murder charges against one of those George brothers, as well as against a doctor and a pain clinic manager.
Jeff George is now facing second-degree murder charges. His 3 clinics were raided last year, 1 week after WPBF 25's exclusive investigation into the pain clinic problem, revealing owners Jeff and his twin brother Chris as multi-million-dollar players in an unregulated industry that lawmakers admit had gotten out of control and was fueling addicts from across the Southeast and Midwest. Now George, one of his prescribing doctors, and his office manager face charges in an overdose death. Dr. Gerald Klein facing first-degree murder charges for prescribing the pills to patient Joseph Bartolucci.
When a pain clinic prescribing doctor and the clinic owner act together to knowingly traffic in pills and profit from it based on greed and not medical treatment, we will hold them accountable for the death as a homicide.
Also charged, East Coast office manager Theodore Obermeyer. George's twin brother Chris remains in jail on federal gun charges. The twins' mother was also arrested and indicted as part of a separate pill mill takedown that netted the indictments of 32 pain clinic defendants.
And the FBI agent in charge of this federal investigation says, quote, this bust dismantles the nation's largest criminal organization involved in the illegal distribution of painkillers. Now, this investigation targeted 4 of the George brothers clinics, both in Palm Beach and Broward County. 32 people, including the George brothers' mother, and the feds say the operation made more than $40 million in profits. Live in the studio, Terry Parker, WPBF.
WPBF 25 News at noon starts right now.
Major new developments today in the case against one of our area's biggest prescription drug kingpins. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Paul Legrone. Today, Jeff George learned his fate. Terry Parker's live right now at the Palm Beach County Courthouse with the sentence. Terry.
Paul, it was almost 2 years ago when I first identified Jeff George as the kingpin behind one of the country's most profitable pain clinics. And at the time, George bragged to me that he and his twin brother ran the biggest pain clinics in the country and were making so much money, he couldn't even tell me how much. Well, today, Jeff George is penniless. His kingdom is dissolved, and he has just been sentenced to 15 years in federal prison. This is Jeff George entering federal court to learn his fate. He pleaded guilty to conspiracy to commit racketeering while running the most profitable pain clinics in the country, doling out hundreds of thousands of highly addictive pain pills to people without real need for them. Prosecutors say over 50 overdose deaths are associated with his clinics, and Jeff George has pleaded guilty to second-degree murder in connection with one of them. In court today, George told the judge he accepts 100% responsibility and has cooperated with the government by giving evidence against his twin brother and his mother.
He is extremely remorseful and contrite and realized he made a horrendous mistake.
Jeff George declined to comment on his sentence. He could have been sentenced to more than 17 years, and his lawyer says they feel the judge treated him very fairly. His wife was also in court. The attorney says they are on food stamps and welfare. And the George twins are among 33 others, including 14 doctors who have also been indicted in this case. All but 4 have pleaded guilty. Live in downtown West Palm Beach, I'm Terry Parker. Paul, back to you.
What's going on, you guys? Welcome back. Another episode of Greenlit Gang TV here. I really appreciate you guys checking out the video today. Kind of going to go a little different direction with this one, but still super interesting. So a lot of you know about the opioid crisis. A lot of you know about OxyContin and just the extreme amount of damage that has caused over the last 15, 20 years. Highly addictive painkiller flooded the market in the late 90s, early 2000s. Thank you to the Sackler family, Purdue Pharma. If any of you haven't looked this up, I encourage you to. I have a hard time believing, though, not one of you, all of you that are listening, I'm sure you have someone that has been affected by opioid addiction. So today's story, we're going to be talking about Chris and Jeff George. A little bit more of a focus on Chris George just because his story had a little bit more information. They ran pain clinics in South Florida in the late 2000s, early 2010s, basically because there was a loophole in the law. Florida didn't have very strict drug dispensing laws back then, and these guys were able to become millionaires overnight, distributing OxyContin and other, not illegal, I was about to say illegal, but other narcotics, highly addictive, and basically flooded a market and did a lot of damage in the process. But there is kind of a flip side to this, right? It's like, how much responsibility do you put on guys that were technically at the time not doing anything illegal? What they ended up doing later did become illegal, but at the time it wasn't. So it's kind of a moral thing where, hey, you know what? We're not doing anything illegal here at the time. We might really take things to the limit, stretch our luck, push the boundaries. But technically, we're not doing anything illegal. No one's forcing people to take this medication. But the other side of that is they knew damn well what they were doing. They were giving these drugs to people that didn't need them, weren't in pain, falsifying x-rays, had doctors that were just paid to sit there and write prescriptions all day, weren't doing any actual medical treatment. So it's a very, very interesting story and one that I only feel like could probably happen in America. So we'll get into it a little bit here. Chris and Jeff George, they grew up in Wellington, Florida. Parents John George and Denise Haggerty. Wellington, Florida is a really upscale neighborhood, a lot of wealth, a lot of privilege, all right? The parents did divorce in 1988, although they remained close with their kids, all right? They always struggled in school, though, right? They were always getting in trouble at an early age, fighting, underage drinking, obstruction of justice, theft. I've seen the dad in interviews talk about it, right? He loves his boys, but he's kind of like, boys will be boys, sort of how he comes off to me when I listen to him, But dad was a luxury home builder who made millions in this line of work, and his boys kind of picked up that entrepreneurship, right? They didn't do well in school, but they saw what their dad did, self-made, and wanted to do that. It's just that they went about it in kind of a half, really crooked way. So Chris was arrested at 13, getting in and out of trouble as juveniles. But again, they picked up that entrepreneurship. Father was a well-known builder in the Palm Beach and Wellington areas. And eventually, and you see this in pictures, right? The brothers are huge, okay? And you can kind of see some of the effects of steroids, like the huge head. Jeff George, some of his mugshots, where he's just got this enormous head. They said, can happen from steroid use. So eventually they get into anabolic steroids, right? Chris was eventually arrested for ordering steroids for personal use and for friends. He ended up having to do 8 months in prison, 6 of which, though, were a work release that, interestingly enough, he did for his father's company. spent a small amount of time going to community college, some other local university, business, construction management, never got a degree, okay? Pretty early on, you know, you don't want to say stereotype, but at an early age, pretty on, you could kind of see the path they were heading down, right? So, you know, they first opened, Chris and Jeff George, they first opened a place called it's called South Beach Rejuvenation Clinic. And basically, once again, they start selling illegal steroids, right? And other health benefits in quotes, but steroids was the moneymaker, okay? It's rejuvenation. So, and you see these still all over the place. If you go down to Florida, they're still all over, right? And technically, like human growth hormone, testosterone, that stuff's legal. You see the 50, 60-year-old white-haired millionaires going in, trying to stay young, taking peptides, all sorts of things. But they were selling illegal steroids as well. They were doing it through like telemedical consultations, phone and email, and they were also selling other bodybuilding products. Jeff was the registered owner, and you see this later in Chris's other business ventures. It doesn't flat out say why. I'm just assuming he had people that did the paperwork and were on as owners just on paper because of his arrest record, and also because I think he was trying to insulate himself. You know, he'd been in trouble before. He knew what was on the line with some of this. So we jump ahead, right, to 2007. They're already kind of involved in this field, fringe medical field, right? Well, after discussions with a doctor and learning the laws around painkillers, all right? And it's just this golden time. You know, a little bit about me. I'm 32, about to be 33. I am 4 years sober from opioid addiction and other addictions as well, but opiates, painkillers, other substances were my drug of choice. So when I first tried painkillers, I was in college, 2010, you know, and there wasn't a stigma around them. There wasn't an awareness. There wasn't an unknown opioid epidemic, you know. So seeing the years in this just kind of really takes me back a little bit. It reminds me of that time when it was kind of the Wild West a little bit with the painkillers. So they have discussions with doctors. Chris wants to try his hand with the pain clinics, gets his twin brother Jeff on board, and that is one note I didn't mention. They are actually twin brothers, all right? It says within 2 weeks, they saw the opportunity for huge profits. The first place they opened in February 2008, it was in Oakland Park, Fort Lauderdale. It took off right away, all right? Chris began placing ads in Craigslist looking for doctors, and you watch this in the documentary. He literally goes on Craigslist hiring doctors. And the doctors that came in, they wanted to do this for money, okay? You know, people think doctor, they immediately think rich. Well, not all doctors are rich, all right? There's doctors that struggle with addiction, alcoholism, that have blown their retirement, or that just wanted to get ahead. You know, not necessarily that they were older and looking for a quick way to make a buck. They were younger and looking for a quick way to make a buck, all right? Well, they find the right ones. And I do kind of think it's funny that, you know, you go on Craigslist. I feel like you know who you're going to attract. You know, a reputable, well-employed doctor is not going to be on Craigslist looking for a job. So anyway, they make it work. They get their doctors, and right away the business takes off. And one thing to focus on, right, they see patients coming from these other southern states, Kentucky, Tennessee, all right? And it was called kind of the opioid highway, right? Like the Oxycontin Express. It was just people were coming from these other states with stricter drug laws and being able to get their painkillers and get their pills with hardly any pushback. People would come individually looking to get their pills, but there was also a business side of it, all right? People, they called them sponsors. So if I'm a local dealer and I want to make money on this, yeah, I can go down and get my own script, but the better way to do it is to find 10 users, 10 people, and I'll say, hey, I'll pay for your food, I'll pay for your gas, you're going to go down there, take as least amount of stops as you can. All 10 of you are going to go in, get your prescriptions. You're going to bring them back. You're going to keep, a quarter of your prescription or half of your prescription. Give me the other half. We're good, right? And it's a free trip. Go down and get half your pills. And people were doing this, and then they were turning around and selling them on the black market, right? And it took off so fast. If you see the years of the operations for this, It was only like 2 or 3 years, and the brothers claimed to have made over $40 million. I mean, it was just like that. You see some of the pictures I put up, the lines wrapped around the building. It was like that from open to close. Chris couldn't find a big enough space, all right? We're going to talk about that in just a minute. But Chris was, and again, I kind of wanted to focus this more on Chris because he was the kind of the one that was in the forefront of all this. He had a lot of the really good ideas. He was using advertising, newspapers, internet. He even hired experts to optimize the search engine results. So if you were to look for a pain clinic or something, his would go right to the top, right? His would be the first one you'd see. His became well known. Word of mouth passes amongst, I hate to say it, but word of mouth passes amongst addicts. It's the same thing in the streets, right? Whoever's got the hottest dope, whoever's got the best drugs at the time, that's where people are going to go. Well, this was what happened with the pain clinics, all right? So at the time, Chris had employed his girlfriend, Diana, later became his wife, to run another smaller clinic. It was called Executive Pain. And you see this in the documentary, right? If somebody had an issue at one of his main clinic, he would just send them down to her. And there is a part in one of the documentaries where the undercover agent actually is talking to a doctor who he says is obviously an addict himself. But the undercover agent messes up and says, oh, yeah, I drink a little alcohol. Well, that puts up a red flag. Doctor calls in Chris George, who comes in and basically Chris, over the doctor's decision, brings him out in the hallway, gives him a number and address, says, hey, go right down there. They'll take care of you. Okay, and that was huge for the police at the time. So that one was in his girlfriend, eventually his wife's name, right? Executive Pain. He wanted to keep himself insulated, wanted to have these things in other people's names, all right? He had constant pressure from surrounding businesses in these strip malls that just hated him, hated the business because you're attracting addicts, you're attracting all sorts of attention, law enforcement attention, media attention. He moved it down to Fort Lauderdale Executive Airport amid complaints from his previous residents. Leases were being terminated. Police were sniffing around. Gets to this new place, but it also ramps up heat, all right? He moves again to North Federal Highway in Boca Raton, Florida. This is where the infamous name American Pain comes into place. This is the new improved, basically they called it the Disneyland of pain clinics, right? He was the straw owner of that, did not have his business in the name, had 5 full-time doctors who were among the highest opioid prescribing doctors in the country. He also had part-time doctors as well, and a staff totaling about 20. They just made it the most efficient, prolific pain clinic around. Get the most pills to the most amount of patients in the shortest amount of time. It was like an assembly line. They spent maybe 5 minutes with the doctors, right? And anybody knows, and that's where kind of the other side of this, right? And this is why they were getting investigated. Anybody knows 5 minutes with these strong in narcotics as they're prescribing and dispensing, something's up, right? Something is up, all right? It said that the businesses were like a frat house. It said that they were, tequila shots in the fridge, stocked with beer. The cash registers could not hold the amount of money needed on a day-to-day basis, so they were literally filling up garbage bins with cash. Cash was all over the floors. I can imagine probably the amount of theft that was going on because, literally in pictures you see money just laying on the floor, pictures being taken, guys doing snow angels in the money. Oh my God, the amount of money that was passing through those places. Chris was hiring one of his buddies. You see him in the documentary, hired him. The guy was out of prison. He was kind of like the head security for it. He talks about just the craziness of it. And, it just was a 0 to 100 in a matter of just a couple years. So like I said, highest prescribing opioid doctors in the country are 5 of them. All right. But they can never escape the media scrutiny. And I do remember, and takes me back to when I was watching a lot of documentaries on this. I do remember this Mariana Van Zeller, a very well-known media person. She's made incredible documentaries. You'll see her on National Geographic with some of her stuff. They called it the Oxycontin Express, where she investigates the pill mills going on in South Florida, and she focuses on Chris George's American Pain because, again, he is, like they said, the Disneyland. He is the gold standard of these clinics. And it makes me think, if I was running one of these and I was making a lot of money, I don't know if I'd want to be the gold standard. I'd maybe just want to fly under the radar and have one that, competed a little bit, but wasn't attracting all the attention. So anyway, he once again has to step up operations, all right? Looks for a newer, bigger place and settled on a 6,000 square foot former bank with 3 floors that was twice the size of the previous office. Now, we talk about the $40 million they made. All right, these guys, you see these pictures, these guys were spending like crazy. They were trying to outdo each other. Jeff had a Lambo. Chris had this custom monster truck. They had motorboats. They had houses, jewelry, Rolex watches. I mean, everything going out, Chris's Diana became his wife. She was a stripper. She acts kind of like, and I kind of roll my eyes at her. She acts like, what they did was wrong, this and that. Talks about the life. But, I mean, girl, you were down. You were in for the fun. You enjoyed the excess. You enjoyed the lifestyle. You enjoyed being the owner of one of his pain clinics. I mean, let's just call it what it is. Everybody was along for the ride, right? I'm sure even the parents, to an extent, were proud. Mom was along for the ride. We'll get into what Mom had in her house here in just a minute. But, so, goes into the 6,000 square foot former bank, 3 floors, twice the size. And you see with the security he used, right? And you see in some of these documentaries, these security guys were no joke. Right? They'd run people off. They would follow them in cars, scare them off, threaten violence, because they're dealing with addicts. People are out there using drugs in the parking lot, injecting drugs, snorting drugs. It was crazy, selling their pills right away because they're addicts. People falling asleep in the waiting room. It was obvious what was going on. So anyway, the new place opens up February 1st, 2010. The smaller clinic he had was with his wife, Diana, ran, called Executive Pain. He even, this is where it was crazy, right? And I don't know if a lot of you guys knew this. He opened up his own pharmacies. One was called Quick Farm. He also had another one in Boca Raton, Florida. His name was on none of these, all right? Again, trying to insulate himself. And also maybe because of his record. So I do have some interesting numbers, right? Doctors treated up to 500 patients daily. They prescribed a mix of Oxycontin, Xanax, and Somos. Someone that struggled with addiction, when I see that, that's a prescription for death. That's a prescription for your heart just stopping and falling asleep and never waking up. Oxycontin, Xanax, when you mix benzos with opiates, it is deadly. Then you throw in the Somos, and I don't know if any of you ever experienced Somos. I have a handful of times. Good night. Good night. In the couple years of operations, approximately 66,871 prescriptions were written. 96% were for Oxy and Xanax, and 80% were to people who didn't even live in Florida. That gives you an idea of the amount of people that were coming from out of state. Chris stated his pill mills made more than $40 million. This is where it gets, right? Or you can kind of see how far it doesn't last, right? He's enjoying his reign at the top for a few years. $40 million in a few years is crazy, all right? The FBI, the DEA, Palm Beach County Sheriff's Office, IRS, they'd been investigating Chris and his brother Jeff's businesses for about 14 months, okay? They had an operation called Oxy Alley, and if you watch the new CNN doc, American Pain, or even Oxycontin Express, this was before they were arrested, the Oxycontin Express with Mariana Van Zeller, but the American Pain one on CNN, that one is so interesting because, and I think it's on HBO Max for you, those of you that want to check it out, please check it out. It's so good. They were talking about how bad they wanted to get these guys, man. I mean, they knew what was happening. They basically say these guys were responsible, or their pain clinics were responsible for like 3,000 opioid deaths. They have recordings of these guys basically talking about these patients like they are just trash. They don't take any responsibility for their deaths, that what they're doing is legal, and hey, it's not my fault. It's not our fault what's going on. These people are addicts no matter what, and if they didn't come to us, they'd go somewhere else. And to be honest, like, I don't like to have too much of a biased opinion. I see both sides. This is someone as a former addict, yet, someone that sought out doctors and used any means necessary. And if you've ever been through that, you know what it's like to not only want, but physically need these pills, these drugs. So I do have a heart for the addicts, but I also understand that if South Pain Management had never opened, if American Pain had never opened, if Jeff George's had never opened, wouldn't have mattered. They would have got him somewhere else. And, so I'm kind of torn on it, I don't like to see that what they talk about in such a flippant way. There was one part where they talk about a car accident with people that they had basically been using so many oxycodones that they fell asleep on train tracks. They get hit by a train, they die. I think one of them survived. I'd have to make sure, but they talk about the accident and they basically say how stupid do you have to be to fall asleep on the train tracks, which is just not cool. You know, these are your patients. These people make you money. They're basically, you know, your customers, and you're just laughing it off. But the money, you know, that kind of stuff can really distort your view of life and what you really think of people. And they say, you know, who you are without money amplifies by 10 when you get money. Okay. So you go back to their childhood, you see some of the struggles they had, and you see kind of what they became. I'm not saying they're bad people. Again, I'm not judging them. You know, hey, they found a loophole. They found something that wasn't a law, and they exploited it. So, you know, it is what it is. But anyway, they'd been investigating them for months. In particular, Chris and his businesses. The investigation was called Oxyali, and eventually on March 3rd, 2010, which is really soon to when he opened that brand new building that was the old bank, they basically came a-knocking. They searched private homes, clinics, securing a lot of evidence. They confiscated real estate, luxury cars, motorboats, and at their mom's home, yes, mom's home, Denise Haggerty, they took out $4.3 million in cash out of multiple safes. It was a 123-page indictment, listed Chris, Jeff, Chris's wife, Diana, and their mom, as well as 13 doctors and 15 other individuals. They were charged with the RICO Act, which is what, you know, the government does when they want to just round up a bunch of people, in particular the heads of it. Conspiracy, organized crime, money laundering. Jeff, interestingly enough, was charged with like a murder resulting from an overdose. So we'll talk about that in just a second. But most of the people, and kind of how these cases go, most of the lower people, they pled guilty right away, got a range of years. Diana and their mom, Denise, they were actually each given 4.5 years for their roles in the conspiracy. Chris pleads guilty, is given 17.5 years, gets it reduced to 14 because he's cooperating with the feds in some of these other trials, and these other cases. He's actually been released, and he's actually in the documentary he got out in beginning of February 2022. Jeff went further along in the court process. I saw where he got 15 years, but then gets an additional 20 in 2015 because of the overdose. I don't know if that's like ran consecutively or concurrently, and that's a big difference. If they run them, you know, together, he doesn't have to do 15, then 20. But if they don't, he's got to do the time on the 15, then he's got to do the time on the 20. So he's still locked up to this day. Interestingly enough, like I said, the brothers do not take responsibility for this. Chris talks about Purdue Pharma, the Sackler family, how they made billions from the misery of addicts and the deaths and the toll it's taken on this country. He says we made peanuts compared to them. But does that absolve him of his responsibility in these 3,000 to 4,000 deaths that they were tied to? In my opinion, no. But in my opinion as well, they are not fully to blame. You cannot just put all of the blame on them and put a nice bow on it. It goes a lot deeper. It goes into the addicts, recovery. What are we doing to help people? What was law enforcement doing, letting these guys run around for years? The state of Florida finally changed its laws, but why didn't it change them before when these pills were coming around and they knew they had a problem in the early 2000s? I mean, there's layers to it. It's so easy to just blame the brothers because they're the face of it, but I don't agree with that. So anyway, there you have it. American Pain, the George brothers, Chris George. Super interesting story. Please go check out that documentary. Love you guys. Thanks for checking out the video.